Here's the wrap-up on this compensated locking nut. So you can see I've got that strip of brass. I start with this brass stock, 1/8 inch brass. What I end up with is this. I have that brass ledge just ahead of the locking nut bed. Yeah, so this is how I orient the guitar so that the super glue obviously goes downhill. You don't put a lot on there. The string tension will hold that in place. I may touch it up once we get the strings on and tune it up. We'll see how it goes. All the values are carved into that brass piece. On the EVO reef fret, we've balanced this. He's gone with an 11 to 49 string tuned to concert pitch. Got that tremolo to float. Got that bridge nice and even with the top of the guitar. Les Paul swap over is done. Frets are buffed out, gleaming. This American Strat is also done. So these are the EVO frets. That Floyd Rose has been regulated. This is the wrap-up on the Les Paul. So that whole swap over from gold to chrome is done now. I think this is one of the issues with those computer-controlled fret dressing machines. They don't crown the fret very nicely. These frets were pretty square on top. If those frets are flat on top, that could be the source of tuning problems as well as buzzing. That string should be fretting dead center on the crown. Those crowns are now chased back to center. Those frets are gleaming. That's exactly what they should look like. This will get rid of any extraneous buzzing, and more importantly, the guitar will play perfectly in tune. If you take a look at that saddle on the bridge, the low E string, it's basically run out of travel. You cannot move it any further. That saddle and the A string saddle need to be taken out. So we'll take off that retention spring that goes across the front of the bridge, and we will pull out the low E and A string saddles and flip them 180 and then reinstall. Also, the compensated nut is in there to replace the original one that was cut a little low. Center, all those crowns are right back to center, tunes impeccably. Today we're going to talk a little bit about basses as opposed to guitars, and what steps you need to take to set a bass up properly. And there's a few different considerations that need to be taken into account. The neck itself is much longer and in many cases much more flexible because of that extra length. I use this concave radius to create this convex radius piece. So the nice thing about this type of gauge is it's self-adjusting. So when it comes to setting up the action on a bass, the action preferences are all over the map. I've seen some bass players that have a very light focused touch. They basically pluck the string about 1 inch from the saddle on the bridge. This doesn't set up the same parameter of oscillation pattern that it would for someone who's kind of slapping and popping. So the nice thing about having this self-adjusting radius gauge, then the player can determine how high or how close they want the action, obviously by adjusting the screws in the saddles. Now the two middle strings I kind of hike way up out of the way, and the two outside strings I adjust them to the height I want. Once that's been established, the foam on the bottom basically creates a spring-loaded self-adjusting radius gauge. So once you've determined the two outside strings, the height you want, then you bring those two middle strings down until they just kiss that piece of wood. This guarantees a perfect match. It's the underside of the string that's going to give you the most accurate radius match to your fingerboard. So there you go, self-adjusting radius gauge. Alright, this bass is all done now. Sorry for the cord kind of wobbling in the foreground. I use this little chord progression. Sort of check the intonation when I'm done on a bass. Because the bass, you know, depending on the player, you can have a very light touch, or you get someone that's slapping. Now I've got the treble turned right off, just so that you can hear there's no fret buzz. is actually a Chinese bass, Fender bass, and lay of the neck on this thing is beautiful. It did need a light fret dress up the top, and then we made the radius gauge and set up this action. It's beautiful to play. That's more or less it. We used the longer blocks on the pivoting neck assembly to support that long, slender neck. Other than that, this thing's good to go, 100%.